Yesterday was a very interesting day as Mike Silver put out a report basically signaling that there are changes happening at the top of the San Francisco 49ers organization, specifically involving Kyle Shanahan. And Kyle Shanahan not really having the ability to have the end say in contract negotiations and things like that. It appears that Kyle Shanahan and his focus will be on roster construction and kind of coaching, basically. I believe he still has say on the final 53 and things like that, but it sounds like the 49ers are making a shift in regards to who has final say in like contract negotiations. And I think the turning point, as Mike Silver alluded to in his great piece that he put out, we did a two-part series on it. It was so good. Uh, you know, kind of stemming from the Ayuk situation. But as you can see, John Lynch, who is on the screen, I did not see and it's not quantified as a report, but I do believe it's a signaling of additional changes that have occurred at the top of the organization, including John Lynch as well. And spoiler alert, I think these are positive changes. Tim Kawakami put out an article on the SF Standard. I'm going to read a portion of it. I definitely implore you to go read the full article because he does give some good context and shows parallels to the Harbaugh bulky dynamic and why he believes this situation is much different. But I want to read you this little excerpt from his article. And it's clear that this is also the changes that were announced yesterday, at least reported yesterday, also sound like they coincide with some more responsibility for John Lynch. So let's read this and then we'll react to it once we get on the other side of it. In this article, Tim Kawakami says this offseason already feels like a pivot point for this era. Deebo Samuel is recently gone. There are loud rumblings of financial pullback amid the start of a crucial negotiation with Brock Purdy. The 49ers hold the 11th pick in the draft, and Shanahan and Lynch head into their 9th season together, dying to erase the memories of last year's 6-11 tumble. Now, this is where you need to perk up. Really, if you look closely, the offseason was set up as a pivot point, and Lynch is set up to be the key player. He's the only guy who has the relationships to hammer out compromises across the franchise, who can keep this tied together from ownership to the financial side of Shanahan's coaching staff to the locker room. Lynch has already been doing this stuff. He's got a lot more of it coming right now. So credit to Tim Kawakami. The way he phrased this was in a way where we can't like pull a quote and say that this is a report. But as you can see, all the language is alluding to that not only and this came out yesterday, like on the heels of the Mike Silver report. So the Mike Silver report was focused on Kyle. This report, it's not necessarily coming out as a report, but read between the lines here. This is effectively saying that this is the pivot. This is the pivot point. That's what we saw with the article. It's a pivot away from how the 49ers have been operating in regards to the SOP, standard operating procedures. And with the changes happening to Kyle, it also sounds like in cohesion with that, John Lynch is going to take on more responsibility. And I saw someone comment this on the Instagram post that I made. And they said, isn't he the GM? Like, how does he get more responsibility? I think it's important to note the power dynamics here at play and that this isn't a typical GM head coach kind of power structure. If you remember, it was Kyle Shanahan who hired John Lynch to be the general manager. Kyle Shanahan had all the final say. He was the de facto general manager. John Lynch coming in to be like the face of the organization, forward facing presence to the media, and kind of like an internal, I don't know, a guy who can bridge all departments and do all the other things that, Kyle Shanahan can't necessarily do. So that's where the this is different. This isn't the general manager hiring Kyle and the Kyle answers to John Lynch. It's the other way around. John Lynch answered to Kyle. At least that from all the things that we have been able to discern has been the understanding, even when it comes to potential, you know, final say with draft picks and, trades, free agent, all that stuff. But I do think that what we are seeing is kind of a power switch, and we're seeing the roles kind of fall into normal roles that we would expect a GM and head coach to have. That's what I'm gaining from this. And from that, that means John Lynch takes on more responsibility, has more staying power. And to me, that is a relief because when the initial report came out yesterday with the situation with Kyle, it kind of struck me as a bit of a negative because it felt like this is the beginning of the end type scenario. These are the moves that typically happen when things start going in the wrong direction and the organization starts to realign itself. Um, but this particular case of having John Lynch in this role, a bigger role with more ability to, I think, have decision making power is a very, very welcomed one, in my opinion. Um, I think that John Lynch is phenomenal. I think he's great in the sense of being a diplomatic presence in the organization. The way he speaks and talks to media, and I think just how he handles all situations. He's a very calming presence, a guy who is optimistic, a guy who is forward thinking. And I do think kind of is the counter of Kyle Shanahan. Kyle's very negative in the sense of he's pessimistic. He's always going to approach things from a very pessimistic point of view, and it just feels like John Lynch is the opposite of that. And I think that this kind of restored like my faith kind of in the future with Kyle and John, because I don't want Kyle and John to go anywhere. And that is kind of where I was like, oh boy, what does this mean? What's happening? They're talking about how this is going to have implications to Brock Purdy's contract. Does this mean that they don't think Kyle's going to be here, so they're going to get rid of Purdy because they're not going to pair him with Kyle in the future? I was thinking of all these different ranges of outcomes, but I didn't see this piece from Tim Kawakami, and I think this kind of recentered those thoughts because that's how much faith that I personally have in John Lynch and being able to correct the ship and being able to be the person to do this role with Kyle Shanahan. I really do. I don't think there's many people who could do this because of Kyle and he's such a strong personality. Um, but if there is a person, it's John Lynch, a Hall of Famer, a guy who's played this game at the highest level. Um, I absolutely think that if what we're gathering is to be true, and again, there's no like official report like from an insider saying like this is the role, like outlined, da da da. You kind of have to piece it together for yourself. You have to look at the information and you have to kind of discern um, a little bit. But for me, I do believe that this is a welcomed addition. I like the idea of John Lynch taking on more responsibility from a front office perspective and kind of having Kyle just focus on the football, just focus on the field, focus with your scheme, focus on the roster, focus on coaching, focus there, and let John Lynch do everything else. And I think that presents itself as a better checks and balance and an opportunity to continue to move this franchise forward with the current pieces in play. So, obviously, like I said, if you haven't seen it yet, I did a two-part video series kind of breaking down what I felt were the important parts of Mike Silver's report that to me was, I would consider kind of a bombshell report, because having organizational shifts like that is a big deal, regardless of what some people may or may not believe. But I think the key element into keeping this thing glued together, and this is where Tim Kawakami really kind of painted the picture of how there are similarities to the Harbaugh Balky era, but because John Lynch is in this spot opposed to Balky, kind of why there is optimism that this actually could be a good thing. It could actually be an improvement from what they have been doing and could continue to push the team forward. So, like I said, I definitely want you to go read this article, but this gave this like gave me a bit of like relief, because that's how much I believe in John Lynch, to make the correct decisions, the balanced decisions, weighing all options, um, weighing all perspectives. Like that's just, he just strikes me as that kind of guy. So to me, this is very welcomed, and it reduced, putting my fan hat on, being a fan of the 49ers, not just someone who covers the 49ers, it kind of was like, all right, cool. Like we're not, smashing the panic button just yet. Like, oh no, massive changes are coming. It just strikes me more as a realignment, and like I keep saying, a welcomed one. So I'm really curious to know how you guys feel about this. So let me know in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.